Hello, my name is Gemma, and my sister once said, maybe dying will finally make you interesting. While I was lying alone in the ICU, hooked up to machines I couldn't pronounce, fighting to stay alive. They were in Hawaii that week, celebrating her wedding on my dime, while I couldn't even reach the call button fast enough. What hurts more? That they left me there, or that they were never planning to come back. They said I was unstable. They tried to take my house, my money, even my name. But how do you fight a family that rewrites the story and casts you as the villain? Would you have believed them too? The rain had already darkened the sidewalk outside my apartment by the time I forced myself out of bed that morning. It wasn't just a cold. I knew that much. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, and my chest felt like it was closing in on itself. I remember thinking, irrationally, that I'd left the heater on too long, that maybe the air was stale or too dry. But when I stumbled trying to get to the kitchen for a glass of water, I knew it wasn't the air. It was me. The EMTs told me later I was lucky. Pneumonia had turned septic, and if I had waited even a few more hours, I might not have made it through the night. They said it like I should have felt fortunate, but lying alone in that white, sterile ICU room, wires snaking from my arms, machines beeping out rhythms my body couldn't keep on its own. I didn't feel lucky. I felt abandoned. There was a pattern to it, a familiar rhythm of being overlooked, talked over, brushed aside like dust on a windowsill. Callista, my sister, had always been the golden one. Tall, camera-ready, with that air of being born into the right lighting. She was the family's pride, their polished picture frame, and I was the one they described with words like practical or independent, which, let's be honest, is what people say when they don't want to admit you've been doing it all alone. From my hospital bed, I tapped open my phone and called my mother first. No answer. Then my father. Voicemail. I hesitated before pressing Callista's name, half knowing what would come. Nothing. Straight to voicemail again. I waited, counting the beeps from the IV machine as the minutes passed. When the message finally came, it was from my mother, sent via text. We're at the airport, already boarding. Callista's wedding's in Maui. We'll check in next week. That was it. No question of how I was. No acknowledgement of the ER. No reassurance that someone would come. Just a text, as cold and flat as the hospital tile beneath my feet. I read it twice, then a third time, in case my fevered brain had misunderstood. But there it was. Plain, intentional, final. I closed my eyes and let the silence answer the questions I hadn't dared ask. The nurses were kind, in that distant way people are when they're used to seeing things fall apart. One of them, a younger woman named Tanya, gently helped adjust the oxygen mask and offered to contact family again. No one's checked in, she said, trying to make her voice soft but failing. You sure you don't want us to call someone? I shook my head. I was sure. By the second day, my fever had broken just enough for me to sit up. Tanya adjusted the bed, handed me my phone, and told me to take it slow. I should have been checking in on labs, my inbox, maybe something comforting, but I went straight to Instagram. Some reflex I couldn't explain. Maybe I was looking for a reason, or an explanation. Instead, I found the real. Callista, standing barefoot on a beach, her wedding dress perfectly windswept, the sunset hitting her just right. A saxophone cover of a Bruno Mars song played over the footage while slow fades and cinematic zooms painted her as the picture of grace. Her caption read, "Living my best life with my favorite people." There was no mention of me. No subtle nod, not even a vague, "wish you were here" to soften the absence. My father commented with heart emojis. My mom had reposted it to her story with, "So proud of our girl," written across it. I scrolled through more images, Callista clinking glasses with her groom, Callista dancing barefoot, Callista laughing with guests. I scrolled until my thumb ached, until my eyes stung, not just from the infection, but from something far deeper. I wasn't jealous. This wasn't about that. I had no dreams of flower arches or matching robes. What I had dreamed of, foolishly it turns out, was that even just once, someone in that family would look up from Callista's spotlight and see me standing in the shadows, coughing my lungs out in an ICU bed. I tried to rationalize it. Told myself maybe they didn't understand how serious it was. Maybe they thought I was exaggerating. I had always been the dramatic one, after all. Despite being the one who quietly paid the bills, booked the flights, covered the insurance shortfalls they never mentioned publicly. But my medical chart said it clearly: ICU, high risk, unstable vitals. And Tanya, when she came in to check my vitals that evening, looked at me with something close to pity. I asked carefully, "Any messages?" She shook her head. "No one's checked in yet." I nodded, trying to breathe evenly as the machines hummed beside me. It was almost evening. The light outside my window had shifted from gray to a deeper, bruised hue. Rain tapped gently against the glass. Tanya adjusted the blanket around my legs and offered me a small smile before leaving. The silence was no longer new, but that night it grew teeth. I was about to shut my eyes when the screen flickered with another notification. I didn't need to look. I knew it was her. Callista had posted again. Another reel. My perfect wedding in paradise. 3 days after Callista's wedding reel flickered across my screen, the room had grown quieter than I thought possible. There were no flowers, no calls, not a single missed message from anyone with my last name. Nurses rotated shifts, machines beeped like lullabies on repeat. I learned to tell time by the shadow patterns crawling across the wall and by the rhythm of pill cups being swapped out. I'd stopped checking my phone for anything other than updates from the hospital portal, labs, vitals, notes from doctors I never met face to face. And then, the message came. It wasn't a private message. No. That would have required intention. It came in the family group chat. My mom, dad, Callista, and me. A thread we used mostly for things like who was bringing what to Thanksgiving, or to share photos from Callista's latest wellness retreat. The same chat where I'd texted just an hour earlier, while still tethered to an IV. "I'm still in ICU. If anything happens, I love you all." I meant it, not in a dramatic way, not as a guilt trip, just truth. A quiet offering to people who had always made it clear I was more useful than lovable. A message you send when you don't know if the next breath might be the one your lungs reject. Callista responded first. "Maybe dying will finally make you interesting." Smiley face emoji, yellow, cheeky, as if we were talking about a vacation or a movie I needed to see. Then came my mother's reply. A thumbs-up reaction. That was it, not even words, just a floating hand giving approval. I stared at the screen, waiting for something else. A follow-up, a correction. Anything to suggest this was a cruel auto-correct mistake. But nothing else came. I read it again, then again, 5 times in total. My brain refused to accept that what I was reading was what they meant. It had to be something else. Surely Callista didn't mean that the only way I'd ever matter to her was through my absence, through death. And my mom, her reaction, had to be an accident. She was never good with technology. Maybe she meant to send a heart. Maybe she didn't see the context. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't the first time I'd been served a low blow masked in charm. I remembered a summer years ago. Callista had been invited to speak at a health expo, and I'd flown down on my own dime to help her coordinate behind the scenes. I wasn't mentioned once on stage, not in thank yous, not in photos. When I brought it up later, lightly, she laughed. "She's only smart because she has nothing else," Callista had said, half grinning over her glass of wine. "Come on, Gemma, that's just how you are. Useful." My mother, sipping her Pinot next to her, added, "She's just teasing. You know how she is." Yeah, I did. I just didn't want to believe it then. But now, lying alone in that sterile room, wrapped in hospital-grade blankets and reality, I saw it all for what it was, clear as the IV fluid dripping beside me. I wasn't part of their picture. I was the wallet, the fixer, the one who sent money when Callista's business went through a low month, who paid off Dad's car loan, who covered Mom's medical emergency that turned out to be elective surgery. My lungs burned with every breath, but this pain, this realization, it was colder. I didn't cry. I took a screenshot, tapped the lock button twice. saved it in a folder I'd never had to make before. Evidence. Then I opened the Notes app. My hands trembled, but not from the infection. I started a list. The title. What I paid for. Line by line I typed. Mom. Breast augmentation. $15,000. Dad. 2017. Chevy Equinox payoff. $8,200. Callista. Rent. Social media ad campaign. Travel expenses for wellness summit. $22,400. Groceries. Utilities. Emergency plane tickets I never used. The numbers blurred together. But the total? Heavy. A weight I'd been dragging for years and calling love. That night, no one called. The nurses dimmed the lights, offered me warm tea. One asked if there was anyone she could notify. I shook my head. There's no one. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I just didn't want anyone showing up out of guilt or obligation. I didn't want more fake smiles or shallow hugs. Before falling asleep, I messaged Luna, my financial advisor. We'd worked together for years. She knew my voice, even in a single sentence. When I'm stable, I want to revise everything. She responded within minutes. Absolutely. I'm here. We'll take it step by step. Rest first. The monitor beeped steadily beside me. I watched the numbers change, watched them level out, drop, then rise again. But none of it felt as loud as the silence in my chest. The kind of silence that only comes when the truth finally settles in. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was aware, sharply so. For years, I had rationalized, minimized, compartmentalized. But now I saw every scar they left, every time I'd swallowed my pride and called it being the bigger person. It wasn't humility, it was survival, a learned habit of shrinking just enough to keep the peace. But peace isn't silence, and silence wasn't safety. Not for me. 3 days passed. No visits, no flowers, no apologies. But in that time, between blood draws and breath work, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I planned. By the morning of the 4th day, my breathing had steadied, but the weight in my chest had not. The inflammation in my lungs was receding, yet something far more corrosive had taken its place. Betrayal sat in my throat like thick syrup. I didn't need more time to think. I needed clarity. And clarity, as it turned out, came with paperwork. A nurse named Danny brought in the initial invoice, tucked in a manila folder. She placed it gently on the tray table beside me, as if it were something fragile, like glass. I remember thanking her, my voice still scratchy from the oxygen tubes. She gave me a quick smile and said, "No rush. You're not going anywhere yet." The bill was dense, pages and pages of codes and medications and fees. But what caught my eye wasn't the total. It was the small line item that read, "Card on file, Visa ending in 4882. That wasn't my primary card. In fact, that wasn't even a card I'd used personally in over 2 years. It was an old emergency backup I kept active strictly for family use, shared with Callista and my mother for just-in-case situations. I remembered clearly disabling auto payments and turning off international transactions last fall, after another wellness retreat Callista had conveniently forgotten to reimburse me for. I pulled my phone off the charger slowly, the IV tugging slightly at my wrist. Once I was logged into the banking app, my jaw tensed. That card had been used 5 times during the past 3 days, while I was unconscious and hooked to a machine, fighting for air. First charge, $3,800 at a designer boutique in Beverly Hills. The timestamp matched the morning before Callista's wedding. Second, $900 at a spa resort on the Big Island, massage, facial, couples aromatherapy. Third, $1,500 to a content creation service that specialized in influencer travel packages, pre-scripted captions, retouched footage, social boost bundles. I recognized the name instantly. It had been tagged in Callista's perfect wedding post. The final 2 charges were smaller, but no less galling. a luxury nail salon in Honolulu, and a private driver's retainer. They weren't just using me, they were using me to fund a fantasy. My sister, dancing barefoot in a designer dress I unwittingly paid for, had done so while I lay tethered to machines that had no idea they were draining the same account. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just sat there, silent, focused, controlled. There was a kind of burn that didn't show up on X-rays, the kind that didn't raise your temperature but still turned everything inside you to ash. As I sat upright in the hospital bed, a message popped up on my screen. It was from a colleague, Tara, someone I'd mentored years ago. "Hey, just checking in. Your text last week felt off. Thought it was weird you said not to visit or contact anyone." My blood went cold. I scrolled up. Tara was right. There it was, texts sent from my number, all with my tone, my abbreviations, my signature lack of emojis, casual but distant, telling her I was good, that the fam is here, no worries, and even a thanks, but let's catch up when I'm back. I didn't write those messages. I didn't touch my phone during those days. Half the time, I wasn't even fully conscious. Someone had texted from my number while I was unconscious in ICU. Someone had pretended to be me. I launched the settings menu, scanned through devices connected to my iCloud. The list showed an unfamiliar IP address in California logged into my iMessage account the day after I'd been admitted. It was masked under a familiar device name, Callista's MacBook Pro. I froze, then exhaled slowly. It wasn't even sloppy. It was arrogant. She hadn't tried to hide it. I tapped through my calendar, opening my email app, forwarding everything to a new folder I named Legal. I contacted Jalen, a friend from IT who owed me a favor after I helped him through a nasty bug in our security backend. "Hey," I typed, "need to trace device access and confirm login behavior from my account. Can you help?" Jalen's response was almost immediate. "Of course. Send me the logs. You okay?" I didn't reply to that part. Over the next several hours, between doses of antibiotics and brief naps, we confirmed everything. Callista had accessed my iMessage account remotely, sent texts under my name, and deleted logs that only partially synced to my device. She wanted the world to think I was fine, that I didn't need anyone, that I wasn't alone because I chose to be. She was building her story while I was being written out of mine. And the worst part? It wasn't even about me. It was about her image, her brand. Her narrative of glowing through adversity, of being the sister who tried everything, the daughter who had to carry the weight of the family. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I did what I always do. I documented. I created a new spreadsheet titled, Assets Controlled by Me. The irony made my lips curl into something that wasn't quite a smile. It wasn't just finances anymore. It was social leverage, legal ties, medical decisions. My name was still attached to too many things I no longer had control over. Mortgage cosigner, parents' house, phone plan administrator, family group plan, emergency credit line connected to Mom's and Callista's accounts, utility bills, car insurance, even Callista's gym membership was routed through my business account. For a long time, I thought doing those things meant love, that helping them stay afloat meant they'd never let me drown. But people don't always return what they take. That night, as the lights in the hallway dimmed and the hallway grew quiet, I sat up straighter in my hospital bed and whispered aloud to no one in particular, "You messed with the wrong version of me." The day I was discharged from the hospital, the sky over Portland was unusually bright. The sunlight felt artificial, like a set piece in a play I no longer wanted to perform in. A hospital orderly wheeled me to the pickup area while I held the discharge papers in my lap, carefully folded, though I'd already memorized every word on them. They said I was stable, that I could recover at home, and that follow-up appointments would be arranged. I didn't have anyone waiting outside. No flowers. No, "We're bringing you home, sweetheart." I ordered a rideshare. The driver didn't say much, which I was grateful for. As we pulled up to my apartment building, I told myself I'd focus on resting, healing, rebuilding, but my front door had other plans. There it was, a thick manila envelope sticking out of my mailbox, the kind that made your stomach twist before you even opened it. I took it upstairs, placed it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it while I put groceries away. The basics I'd had delivered the day before: soup, crackers, tea, just enough to survive a week of silence. Eventually, I peeled the envelope open. The first page read, "Notice of petition for guardianship." I stopped breathing for a full beat. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a concern. It was a legal petition filed by my mother, Vera Thorne, and co-signed by my sister, Callista Greaves. They were petitioning the court for full legal and financial guardianship over me. They were trying to take everything. The document stated I was mentally compromised, unable to manage financial obligations, and emotionally unstable due to prolonged medical decline. They'd even included a medical opinion, signed by a licensed professional, Dr. Elric Marin. I hadn't seen Dr. Marin in years. He was a longtime friend of my mother's, a semi-retired psychiatrist who lived in Lake Oswego. He wasn't part of the hospital team. He hadn't evaluated me. And yet, his name was there, neatly printed, with a signature below it. I flipped the page again. Subject displays obsession with familial control, shows signs of paranoia regarding financial transactions, and demonstrates delusional interpretation of family dynamics. Delusional, paranoid, obsessed. I felt like I was reading a script they'd written without me, casting me in a role I never auditioned for. I called my lawyer, Tom. He picked up immediately. "You're out," he said before I could speak. "Good, I was just about to call you." I told him about the envelope. He wasn't surprised. "They filed it yesterday," he said. "I got the electronic copy this morning. We'll contest it." "On what grounds?" I asked, my voice flat. "Fraud. And we'll add defamation if that report is what I think it is." He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't coddle. That was why I hired him. "Do you want to come in today?" he asked. "No," I said. "Schedule it. I'll be there tomorrow." After the call, I sent a single message to Luna, my financial advisor. "They're making their move." She replied in under a minute. "They didn't expect you to wake up." No, they didn't. They were building a future where I didn't exist. Just my money. Just my name on the account. My signature on the dotted line. I was supposed to slip away quietly, conveniently, while they narrated their version of loss, grief, sacrifice. Instead, I got up. The next morning, I made my way to Tom's office. Slow steps, still recovering, but each one more grounded than I'd felt in weeks. He met me in the conference room with a pot of coffee and a folder the size of a college thesis. Luna joined via video call. Her screen showed spreadsheets, flagged transactions, and emails with timelines that told a story far more honest than any handwritten affidavit ever could. Callista had started draining my emergency fund before I was admitted. She'd rerouted payments from the family phone plan to a different account, one under her fiancé's name. My mother had scheduled the initial consultation with Dr. Marin days before I collapsed. This wasn't spontaneous. This was a campaign. "We'll need to respond within 10 days, Tom said. "And if you're willing, we can push for a countersuit." "For what?" I asked, even though I knew. "Fraud, misrepresentation, intentional emotional distress." I nodded. "Do it." That evening, just as I was settling in on the couch with my heating pad and herbal tea, there was a knock on the door. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't expecting anyone. The second knock was louder. When I opened it, I was face to face with the two people I least wanted to see. Vera, dressed like she was headed to brunch at the country club, and Callista, wearing oversized sunglasses and a neutral-toned trench coat like she was starring in a lifestyle ad. "Gemma?" my mother said with a tight smile. "We were just in the neighborhood." "Sure you were," I said, leaning against the doorframe. Callista took off her glasses. "We wanted to check on you. You've been through so much." I didn't move. "What do you want?" "To talk," she said, "about how we can fix this. There's no need to make things harder than they need to be." I almost laughed. "You mean harder than filing for guardianship behind my back? Or inventing medical diagnoses through someone who's never stepped foot in my hospital room?" "Gemma," Vera said with that patronizing calm she always used when trying to sound reasonable. "You're still recovering. This isn't personal. We just want to make sure you're protected. It's for your own good." And there it was. Those words again. I stepped forward. If you say, for my own good one more time, I will call security and have you removed from the building. They didn't move. Callista opened her mouth like she wanted to fight. I saw the flash in her eyes, the same one she used on stage when someone questioned her authenticity, but Vera cut her off. Well, she said, smoothing her scarf. Then I guess we'll just let the court decide what's best, while you still have a say. I shut the door. Not loudly, not in anger, just decisively. The kind of close that doesn't echo, the kind that settles everything in its place. They thought I was weak, that I'd crumble under pressure, that I'd be too sick or too scared to fight. What they didn't know was I'd already started pulling the strings they thought were theirs. I didn't sleep much after that door closed. The click of the lock echoed in my mind long after they'd walked away. I made tea, sat on the floor with my laptop, and pulled up the wedding expense files. I hadn't looked at them since before the hospital, when I thought I was helping my sister build her dream day, not fund my own erasure. It was around 2 a.m. when the video came. A mutual friend, Olivia, someone who used to work with Callista on a failed skincare brand, messaged me out of nowhere. Thought you should see this. I figured you weren't there. She included a link, a video posted on a wedding videographer's social channel. I clicked without thinking. The screen faded in on Callista standing at the front of an open-air venue in Maui. Her eyes looked misty, sunset behind her, soft piano music playing. It was professionally lit, color-graded and edited like a short film. Then she spoke. My little sister couldn't be here today, she said, voice trembling, but I know she's watching over us in spirit. There was a collective awe from the guests. The camera panned to people dabbing their eyes. Her new husband squeezed her hand. She went on. Gemma has always been a guiding light in my life. Her quiet strength, her generosity, it's something I carry in my heart every day. I wish she could be here, but I understand, and I want her to know she is loved. The comments section was full of admiration. So touching. What a strong sister bond. Callista is such a class act. I stared at the screen for what felt like a full hour. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. That video had over 200,000 views already. She made me a ghost, a tragic, invisible angel to prop up her fairy tale. I hadn't just paid for the wedding, I had paid to be erased from it. I pulled up my records. My company card still showed the deposits to the venue, the floral designer, the DJ, the bakery. I'd arranged every one of those contacts myself. And then I remembered, each contract had listed me as the event planner. Not Callista. Me. I logged into each vendor's portal and started reading. Sure enough, something had changed. On 3 of the contracts, my name had been replaced with Event Coordinator, Ashley Green. I didn't know an Ashley Green. Then I remembered Callista had an assistant with that name. Barely 20, more of an intern than anything. But somehow she was now credited for planning a 6-figure wedding. The next morning, after 2 hours of broken sleep and a coffee that tasted like bitterness more than caffeine, I made the call. She answered on the second ring. Well, look who finally wants to talk, Callista said, chipper as ever. I didn't waste time. You know exactly why I'm calling. A pause. Is this about the tribute? Because I thought it was a nice touch. You mean the lie? I snapped. The performance. You faked a eulogy for your living sister. You weren't there. You knew I couldn't be. Callista sighed, clearly bored now. Gemma, no one cares who paid for what. People remember who walked down the aisle, who stood at the altar. That's what matters. Then let them remember that when the truth comes out, I said, voice low. Because I'm done covering for you. I'm done letting you sell a version of us that doesn't exist. She laughed. Sweetheart, no one wants receipts. They want stories. That's why I get paid and you don't. I hung up. Then I started documenting. I pulled every invoice, took screenshots of every altered name, compiled the date stamps, created a file labeled Misrepresentation of Ownership, and sent it to Tom. Next, I drafted formal cease and desist letters to each vendor. I wasn't out for them. I knew they'd been misled, but they needed to know they were being used in a broader scheme. I sent the letters directly and blind copied a few trusted media contacts. Then, I pulled the last card. I halted all pending payments. Within 2 days, I got the first call from the floral designer. She was livid. "We never got the balance. Your sister told us you'd already processed it." "Check the account," I said. "Nothing's gone through, and you might want to check who you list as your coordinator. It's not legally accurate." Word spread fast. A DJ posted on Twitter, "Turns out the angelic bride didn't pay the band, thanks to her ghost sister for saving our contracts." Within a week, there were whispers, then louder voices, then a full-on Reddit thread titled, "Is Callista Greaves a Fraud?" filled with screenshots, vendor complaints, and links to her tribute video contrasted with my financial records. I didn't have to post a single word. They did it for me. Every time she tried to spin it, "This is a misunderstanding, my team is handling it," another document surfaced. Another vendor came forward. They had thrown a wedding with my money, my silence, and my absence. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the ghostwriter. I was the editor, and I had just taken the pen back. It was a Sunday afternoon when I made the drive out to my parents' place. There was no real reason to wait any longer, just a pile of unfinished errands I kept postponing, mostly because I didn't want to see the house again. I didn't want to stand in the same doorway where I used to hand over checks for the mortgage, or park in the same driveway where my name was still attached to the loan. I had 2 goals: pick up my old tax files from the hall closet and grab the box of kitchen items I left there last fall. Things I hadn't needed in my apartment but never got around to moving. It was sunny but still cold, that odd mix of Oregon weather that felt like the season itself couldn't make up its mind. I pulled up in front of the house, parked, and approached the front door, expecting the usual creak of the handle, the familiar thump of the lock sticking before it gave way. Except it didn't give. I jiggled the key, then pulled it out and tried again. Nothing. That's when I noticed the sticky note. It was taped crookedly on the upper panel of the door, written in my mother's delicate, practiced cursive, like it belonged on a casserole dish or a Christmas card. "You chose distance. Stay there." No salutation, no signature. Just that one line. I stood there, motionless, for longer than I care to admit. I don't know what I expected. Maybe confusion, maybe guilt. But mostly, I felt hollow. Not shocked, not outraged, just a quiet ache in the place where family is supposed to live. I turned around and scanned the porch. To the right, beside the faded bench where my dad used to read the Sunday paper, were 3 black trash bags. One of them was torn open at the top, revealing a stack of neatly folded dish towels and a yellow mixing bowl I'd bought when I was 23. My belongings, bagged and waiting like expired groceries. I sat down on the front step and took a slow, deep breath, the kind of breath they'd taught me to take in the hospital to keep my lungs open. Then I pulled out my checkbook. It had been a while since I'd written one. Most things were digital now, but this moment demanded paper, ink, proof. I wrote out a check for $1. In the memo line, I scrawled, "For everything you never paid me back for." I folded it into a plain envelope, along with a typed letter I'd printed earlier that morning. "This is the last transaction between us. Every other debt is emotional, and I'm done being your creditor." I placed the envelope in the mailbox beside the door, flipped the red flag up, and walked back to my car. I didn't look back. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop and began severing ties. First, I pulled up the utility accounts. Electricity, terminated. Gas, removed my name from the bill. Water, internet, phone plan, all gone. Then came the bigger ones. Health insurance, canceled the family policy I'd been paying out of pocket. Car insurance, removed my parents' vehicles from my multi-car discount. Mortgage, contacted the bank and submitted a formal request to be removed as co-signer. It would trigger a refinancing process. If they couldn't meet the requirements, they'd lose the house. I paused before making that last call. It wasn't revenge, it was release. For too long, I'd been the oxygen to a system that kept me gasping. Once everything was done, I left a voicemail. "You want full control?" I said. "Now you have it. All the bills, too." That night, I changed the locks on my own door. The locksmith came at 6:30. By 7:15, the deadbolt clicked smoothly, and the extra keys were in my drawer, not in someone else's purse or pocket. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The sun had dipped below the trees, casting long shadows on the street. I didn't feel powerful or brave, just clean. Like something had been washed away that had clung to me for far too long. Around 8 o'clock, the buzzer rang. It was Sarah, a friend from work. She held up a bottle of wine and a paper bag. "No excuses. You've earned a drink and real food," she said as I opened the door. We sat on the floor and ate Thai takeout with plastic forks. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer advice. She just passed the soy sauce when I reached for it. Before she left, she handed me a card. Inside was a note written in purple ink. "You are not alone anymore." It was simple, not poetic, but it landed. I hadn't told her about the note on the door, or the trash bags, or the check. But she knew. Somehow, she knew. The next morning, I opened my calendar and marked key dates. Court hearings, financial reviews, debt reevaluation. Not as a reminder, but as milestones. Every entry was a step forward. I lit a candle and let the silence fill the room. No voices, no demands. No guilt trips or gaslighting, just peace. And me, sitting in a space I paid for, with locks I chose, surrounded by things no one could claim they gave me. I used to write checks to keep the peace, begging with money, bargaining with silence. Now I wrote my name on the walls they thought would never belong to me. The shift was almost too predictable. I'd barely started reclaiming my name before they decided to hijack the narrative. That's how it always went, didn't it? The moment you stop apologizing for existing, the world that benefited from your silence accuses you of shouting. It began with a message from a former coworker. "Hey Gemma, just checking in. I saw something online. Are you okay?" Another ping followed. Then 3 more. "Have you read the interview?" "Wow, didn't expect to see you in headlines." "Callista's blog feature is trending. You might want to look." I didn't want to look, but I did. The article was hosted on a popular lifestyle site, one Callista had guest-written for before. This one was titled, "My Sister's Mental Breakdown and Why I Had to Protect Our Parents." My stomach clenched before I even scrolled past the headline. Callista, in her signature style, opened with a photo of herself in soft lighting, framed by flowers and glowing in faux humility. The article read like a diary entry soaked in public relations gloss. "She used to be so bright." But over time, something changed. She started accusing us of stealing, of lying, even of wishing her harm. She pushed everyone away, insisted on control over everything, even our family's finances. She wasn't always like this, but sometimes, the mind plays tricks when pain is left unchecked. And then, the quote from my mother. "It's heartbreaking to see her destroy everything we built for her. We just want her back." What had they built for me? A lifetime of being useful, but never celebrated. Of funding their comfort while swallowing their condescension? The worst part wasn't the lies. It was the fact that they knew exactly which truths to twist. The story was going viral, fast. By the next morning, the blog's comment section was closed, but the screenshots had already spread. I started getting tagged on Facebook. A few acquaintances messaged me directly. Not to pry, but to say they'd seen it, that they were sorry, that they didn't believe it. Not really. Still, the whispers had begun. 2 days later, Callista went live. A curated backdrop, fresh-cut peonies, golden hour lighting, a cup of untouched tea beside her. She looked appropriately tired, as if she'd been carrying this pain for too long. "I just want to say thank you to everyone who's reached out," she began. This wasn't easy to share, but I felt I had to speak up, not to blame, but to help. Her voice cracked, perfectly timed. We've tried everything, therapy, patience, space, but sometimes love isn't enough. And when someone refuses to get help, the family suffers in silence. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, watching her reel in sympathy like it was her birthright. "We still love her," she continued. "Of course we do, but you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped." And that's when it happened. The chat, once full of hearts and encouragement, began to shift. A comment appeared. "Didn't you post beach selfies while your sister was in the ICU?" Another one followed. Screenshots say otherwise. Then another. That maybe dying message wasn't photoshopped, Callista. We all saw it. I watched the screen as the momentum flipped. More users dropped receipts, old posts, deleted tweets, comments from my page, side-by-side comparisons of Callista's story with actual timelines. One person uploaded the vacation reel, captioned, "Living my best life with my favorite people," posted 2 hours after my ICU admission timestamp. And then the hashtag started trending. Hashtag Justice for Gemma. Brands began pulling back. A small skincare company she endorsed released a statement distancing themselves from unverified narratives causing community distress. A major supplement line removed her image from their Instagram feed. The influencer house she occasionally collaborated with. They unfollowed her quietly, then publicly backed a wellness creator who made a video titled, "What Happens When Healing Hurts Someone Else." One of the wedding vendors she stiffed tweeted, "Turns out the quiet sister was the strong one all along." I didn't have to say a word. Vera tried next. She released a statement through some community church bulletin board, just vague enough to sound spiritual, just sharp enough to imply victimhood. Families face trials, it said, but some choose bitterness over healing. We continue to pray for those who've lost their way. When asked about the legal filings, Vera stumbled. She told a small local journalist, "It's not like we were trying to take her life over. We were worried. That's what mothers do." Except mothers don't falsify medical evaluations and try to claim guardianship of their adult daughters while they're unconscious. I said nothing. No press release. No rebuttal interview. No setting the record straight. Instead, I posted one sentence on my private page. I told the truth to the people who mattered. The rest can read between the lies. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't viral ready. But it was mine. Within an hour, friends shared it. Co-workers reshared. A few of Callista's former collaborators commented things like, "I knew something felt off." Some strangers added hearts. Others just said, "This hit home." By the end of the day, the post had reached more people than any campaign I'd ever paid for. Not because I shouted, because I didn't. Because when a house of cards falls, you don't need to yell to be heard. You just need to stand still and let the wind do its job. They'd gotten loud, desperate, theatrical, full of performative grief. And it backfired. I didn't need to scream. All I had to do was show up and let their words hang themselves. The morning of the hearing, I woke before the alarm. I had laid my clothes out the night before. Navy suit, low-heeled black pumps, a soft cream blouse that I'd bought last year but hadn't worn yet. The kind of outfit that didn't shout power, but wore it quietly, like a well-fitted truth. It wasn't just another court date. It was the day I stepped into the room where they thought they'd narrate my story without me. Downtown traffic was light. My Uber driver made polite small talk about the weather. I nodded and smiled at the right moments, though I wasn't really listening. My mind was full of folders, timelines, emails, recordings, every scrap of proof I had carefully gathered and double-checked. Outside the courthouse, I paused to take one breath. Just one. And then I walked in. They were already there. Callista sat to the right, in a pale lavender dress and nude heels, looking like she was waiting for a brunch reservation, not a legal reckoning. Vera was beside her, wrapped in a beige shawl, dabbing at her eyes before anyone had said a word. Their lawyer looked polished, expensive, the kind who got paid in image control and silence agreements. I walked past them without stopping. I didn't nod, didn't flinch. I kept my focus on the courtroom door ahead. Inside, the space felt colder than I expected. Pale wood benches, flickering overhead lights, a judge whose face was unreadable. "Ms. Vexley," the judge said, adjusting her glasses as she looked over the docket. "You're here to respond to a guardianship petition filed by Vera Thorne and Callista Greaves?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice steady. "And you've submitted a countersuit?" "Yes." She nodded once. "Let's proceed. Do you have evidence to support your claims?" I opened my laptop. Plugged in the HDMI cable. The screen behind me lit up. "This," I said, "is the financial timeline. Slide 1. A a spreadsheet showing every dollar I'd contributed to my parents' mortgage, my sister's business, their utilities, their vacations. Slide 2, timestamps from my hospital stay, showing the exact hours I was sedated, overlapped with screenshots of purchases made using my accounts. Slide 3, the text message. Callista's now infamous line, "Maybe dying will finally make you interesting." I watched the judge's jaw tighten as she read it. "I'd like to submit that as Exhibit A," I said calmly. Callista's attorney tried to object, but the judge waved it off. "Continue." I nodded, changed the slide. "This," I said, "is the clip." The screen played a short video. Callista, during her Hawaii trip, laughing over cocktails, her voice clear, unfiltered. "If she croaks, maybe I'll finally get that apartment." Gasps rippled through the room. Vera turned to her lawyer, whispering furiously. Callista's face went pale. She stood up. "That's out of context," she blurted. The judge raised a hand. "Sit down, Ms. Greaves. We're not finished." Their attorney fumbled, asking for a recess. Denied. I continued. Quiet, direct. "This is not about revenge," I told the judge. "This is about control. I was unconscious in a hospital bed. They filed for guardianship. They tried to take everything I had left, and when that wasn't enough, they tried to rewrite me as a villain who needed saving." I paused. They didn't expect me to get up. The room was still. The judge leaned back in her chair, silent for a long moment before speaking. "The guardianship is denied, effective immediately. Ms. Vexley retains all legal and financial authority." I closed my laptop. The court also finds sufficient grounds to refer Mrs. Thorne's claims to Adult Protective Services for fraud investigation. Vera looked like she'd been slapped. Furthermore, the judge added, "any joint accounts, financial ties, or obligations Ms. Vexley had with either petitioner are hereby dissolved by court order." Callista sat down slowly, as if her knees had finally caught up with her conscience. Vera whispered, "This is outrageous. We did this for her." The judge didn't even blink. "You did this for yourselves." Outside the courthouse, a small group of reporters had gathered. Someone shouted my name. "Gemma, do you have a comment?" I kept walking. The flash of cameras followed, but I didn't stop. At the bottom of the steps, a woman in a blazer blocked my path gently. "Ms. Vexley, I'm from the Oregon Financial Abuse Prevention Task Force. We'd like to talk if you're willing." I handed her my lawyer's card. "No comment," I said. "The truth's been filed." Back in my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. My phone buzzed, not with attacks, but with thank yous. Coworkers, old friends. 2 vendors from Callista's wedding. Even a stranger who'd followed the case online. One message stood out. "You didn't just protect yourself. You showed people how to stand up without screaming." The next day, I got word that Vera's retirement benefits had been suspended pending investigation. Her church removed her from the community board. Callista's agent quietly terminated their contract. Sponsors dropped out. One by one, the lights she'd depended on flickered out. They built their lives on my silence, and I ended their empire with a single sentence. The week after the court ruling moved by in a strange haze. There were no more depositions, no more press calls, no more urgent folders waiting to be opened. Just long walks through my Portland neighborhood, where leaves were beginning to turn and familiar storefronts waved back in soft recognition. For the first time in years, I wasn't anticipating crisis. I wasn't planning my next defense. I was just breathing. One afternoon, as I walked into the neighborhood hardware store to buy light bulbs and a replacement for the drawer handle my dog had chewed on, I passed a shelf near the back that stopped me cold. It was an old transistor radio, dusty, the kind with a large dial and antenna that bent in a way that felt nostalgic, not broken. I reached for it slowly, held it in both hands, and in that moment, my body was no longer standing in a narrow aisle. It was 15 years ago. Summer. Heat thick in the garage. My father crouched beside me, sleeves rolled up, grinning like we were building a rocket ship. "Wires don't mean much unless they're connected, right?" he had said, handing me the tiny screwdriver. "But even then, not everything broken is ruined, Gemma." Back then, I believed him. and when I'd found myself half-conscious in a hospital bed, Callista filing for control of my life, I had nearly signed the paper they sent. Power of attorney. Just to make the noise stop. But something, maybe that memory, had frozen my hand. Made me ask the nurse to hold it for one more day. That radio had saved more than one life. I brought it to the counter. The clerk didn't charge me. Old thing like that? He smiled. It needs someone who remembers how to listen. A few weeks later, on a chilly Friday morning, my phone rang. Hey, it's Sebastian, my father's nephew. We hadn't spoken in years, not since Grandma's funeral. I just wanted you to know, he said. Not everyone believed them. Some of us. We watched. We remembered. He told me Vera was now renting a room from a friend of hers, someone from church, that she'd stepped down from all her committees and hadn't been seen at the farmer's market in months. Callista, he said, had picked up part-time work at a marketing agency. Her influencer gigs had dried up. Sponsors pulled out quietly, and she hadn't posted in weeks. You were never loud, Sebastian added, but they forgot that silence has its own kind of weight. I'm not angry anymore, I said. I know, he replied. That's what makes this matter more. I didn't cry after the call. I didn't feel triumphant, just grounded, like my feet were finally planted somewhere they belonged. Spring gave way to summer, and then to early fall. The garden behind my apartment, once cluttered with overgrown lavender and forgotten tomato vines, was cleared, replanted, and blooming. Tom and I said our vows under the canopy of lights strung across the backyard. No grand speeches, no "we overcame everything" cliches, just soft words exchanged between two people who had learned how to listen to silence. Juno handed me the bouquet. Tom's mother buttoned the back of my dress, her fingers steady and warm. A neighbor brought pie. Another brought extra chairs. One of my coworkers offered to take photos, refusing payment. As the sun dipped and laughter swelled under twinkling lights, I whispered to myself, this is what family actually feels like. No conditions, no currency, just care. Weeks later, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was from Callista, not an apology, a plea. Can we talk? I'm lost. No specifics, no acknowledgement of what she'd done, just a thin thread dangling in a sea of everything she had cut. I stood at my kitchen counter with the envelope still open in my hand. For a moment, I considered replying. Instead, I folded the letter carefully, walked it over to my desk, and slid it into the bottom drawer. No anger, no judgment, just a decision. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up a draft I'd been working on, a blog post I hadn't shared yet. Title: When Blood Is Not Bond, Choosing to Stay Whole. It started with the line, I stopped measuring love by DNA when I realized harm didn't need to be a stranger to be real. I closed the lid gently. I'd carried a lot of things in this life, burdens dressed as duty, silence disguised as peace. But now I was choosing differently. I don't want revenge anymore. I want joy. And that's the only thing they truly never gave me, but I've now given myself. In life, not all betrayals come from strangers. Some wear the face of family. Sometimes, choosing peace means walking away from those who expect your silence to fund their comfort. What would you do if the people closest to you tried to rewrite your story? If this story moved you, drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Would you have walked away or fought back? Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories just like this one.